Welcome to the Moulding Health Show. Our goal is to leverage the wisdom and experience of healthcare practitioners to set you on a path of self-discovery and healing. These insights, coupled with a multidisciplinary approach to each area of interest, should provide an invaluable resource to everyone looking for a better approach to health. Please note that this episode covers a mental health issue in rather explicit detail. If you or someone close to you recently experienced one of these conditions, this content may evoke unaddressed pain. Our intention is to inform and empower our audience, but this material is not a substitute for therapy. Please use your discretion with regards to accessing this or other material on the site that may be triggering or traumatic for you. And remember that the best strategy is to seek professional assistance for unresolved painful or traumatic experiences that you may have undergone. We have included a link in the show notes where you can be connected to one of these therapists. In this episode of the show, we speak to Simran Parekh about CBT and mental health from a counseling psychologist perspective. Simran Parekh, welcome to the show. So we're so glad to have you on board and talking about CBT and mental health and all of that great stuff from a counseling psychologist perspective. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be a part of this.
No, always a pleasure, firstly, and more of a pleasure today because, I mean, you're speaking to us out of India, which is amazing because when we were, obviously we started in South Africa, we've got, quite a few guests from the UK, we've had guests from New Zealand and Nigeria, but I think you're our first guest out of India, which is really amazing. And I've been following you on LinkedIn, and I think you're doing some really great work. And that's the reason, I reached out and, started speaking to you. So really, really honored to have you on the show and talking about CBT and mental health. So really, really interested to hear that. But maybe, Simran, to kick it off, tell us what is CBT?
Okay. So, as you know that we are hearing this term on a usual basis if we, see the space of mental health, the first thing that comes up is CBT or mindfulness. So CBT is something, the full form of which is cognitive behavior therapy, but it is used for a lot of concerns and, it's basically working on your thoughts. It helps you to think about the present, the here and now. It helps us to modify our perspective. Because, say, for example, you're in a situation. So in that situation, the human tendency is to first have a negative thought. Will I be able to get out of the situation or not? Why me? What can I do? How can I solve this? So rather than focusing on the problem, CBT helps us to focus on solution or more towards how can I come out of the situation rather than why me and rather than thinking about the problem.
Okay. And I mean, to put it in context, on the show, we've covered some of the other modalities like psychodynamic, the psychodynamic approach, the, contextual therapy, hypnotherapy as an example. So in your experience, how does CBT, I know you said, so it's much more solution orientated. So does that mean that it's more geared for more short-term work or can you use it on a long-term basis as well?
No, that's where, most of the people get mistaken that, CBT is a short-term thing because it has just a few things to do with like journaling or just working on rational thinking, but it's not that the case because it's just more than journaling. And CBT, I would say from my own personal experience is a long-term process, a long-term therapy. Because the therapy itself is very long term. You do not see modifications or improvements maybe in 2 or 3 sessions or for that matter 4 sessions. Because after that you might feel a bit better. But your issues and concerns are not of today. So CBT works on what is based for a longer period of time, the thought process that you're carrying for maybe ages. Say, for example, today you have certain personality traits, right? So would you be able to change them or modify them, say, for example, in a month?
No, not at all.
Exactly. So I refrain from using the term change because personality or anything for that matter we cannot change. It's a very strong word. I always use modify instead because we can always modify. We can never change one's personality. Similarly, with thoughts, we can modify their thoughts. So, with someone coming in with personality disorder or personality issues, I always tell them we are not here to change your personality. We are just here to modify it so that you can balance your life in society, work, and other aspects as well. Similarly, CBT works. It helps you to balance your thoughts. It helps you to think in a more structured manner. So it's a long process, I would say.
Okay. And Simran, so how would you typically use that in therapy? So I'm assuming, I think we'll cover just now how clients find you and how they start working and stuff like that. But typically, if a client came and saw you and, you started working with them as a client, how would you typically use CBT in terms of that therapeutic process?
I would say I don't only use CBT because my approach is an eclectic one, where I use various techniques from different therapy modules. Because, in my opinion, each client is different. Maybe the cause or the concern they are coming in with is similar, like stress. You might come in with, I have stress regarding my work. Your friend might come in with that, I have stress regarding my family. Both of you do have stress, but the stressor or the trigger is different. For you, it's work, and for him or her, it's family or personal issues. So I cater to you for work purposes. I cater to your friend for family or personal concerns. So both of you are different in that way, even though the concern is stress, but the stressor is different. So I use an eclectic approach where I don't only use CBT, but I also use techniques from mindfulness, other therapies like DBT. And I don't want to get into more of,
Mm.
proper theory part, but I would say mainly if there I understand if the client is coming in with, say, a lot of overthinking, or maybe too much of thought distortion, like thinking like, I am not good enough, or my efforts are not being appreciated, or I feel that my efforts are not uh, valued or good enough, like I am putting efforts but I don't think those are enough. So there is where CBT works to modify these thoughts.
Okay, cool. And I like the fact that you mentioned eclectic as well and explained it as well, how it works. Because I think, obviously, obviously there are psychologists that only prescribe to a certain modality, but I think, yeah, I mean, I definitely
Yeah.
found psychologists that use the eclectic approach. And that's a great one as well in terms of, obviously each person is different, which is true, and
Yeah.
modifying it to that. We did cover DBT as well in the episodes, so we have covered that as a modality as well, so we are
Okay.
aware of it. If if I change direction a little bit and just cover the mental health aspects, Simran, I
Mhm.
mean, can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, what is mental health, firstly? Obviously, it's become a lot more, there's a lot more awareness in the world over the last few years, maybe post-COVID as well. It's even become even more apparent. But in your words, what is mental health?
Okay. I would love to, understand what you gauge from the word mental health, and then I would proceed to my, answer, if that's
Yeah, that's perfect. In my sense, mental health would be, catering for everything, just like how you cater for your body, like exercise, nutrition and stuff like that. The focus
Mhm.
around having a solid or a stable and happy, mental space is important. And then I think that's where the terms like work-life balance started coming up, a lot more in the last few years, making sure that you're happy, and stuff like that. And I think also the dark side of mental health, and I'm not sure if you cover it, I suppose you do cover it in mental health, but things like depression, anxiety, stress would be the downsides, or where you see mental health not being almost in that balance, state. So that's kind of how I would answer it. How many marks would I get
okay.
for that?
That's a great answer.
Hmm?
But in my understanding, I wouldn't say there's anything a downside or right or wrong in mental health. Because, see, in physical health also, we do get a fever, a cold. Do we see it as a downside and not go to office or not work, or just we think about seeing a doctor as soon as possible, right?
Yeah, no,
So,
that's a really good point, actually.
so similarly, in mental health also, I always request people to, in the awareness streams, that it's as important as your physical health. So it's a very broad term, mental health, and it involves our balance between our mind, body, and emotions. So mind being, because see, some way or the other, whatever you're thinking in your mind affects how you're feeling. And that in turn affects your action or reaction or your behavior towards anything. So all three of them are connected. And if you have balance of all those three things, probably you are in a stable mental health. There is no good or bad mental health, I would say, because there are days where even I am stressed. So that doesn't mean that my mental health is not great. So that's why I said, stress, depression is not a sign of bad mental health. It's just that there's an imbalance. And to
Mm,
balance it, you just need to seek professional help as you do in terms of physical health.
that makes sense. Yeah, so I like that actually, and I think the one I mean I'm going to get the name wrong, so I'm not even going to mention the name. But the one practitioner
Okay.
actually said that so maybe like maybe it was around depression, but said it's a temporary kind of aspects. It's not like the person is depressed and then they're depressed for life. It's like a phase in their life, and I thought that was quite interesting. And what you just said now kind of made me think of that, which is exactly what it is. And also, like if I go back to what I was saying, in terms of the physical aspects, I mean, the physical aspects is not every one of us, has that perfect shape and body and all of that stuff. And it's, like that's actually okay, because that's the norm. And,
Yeah.
and it's stuff that you aspire to maybe, but it's not like everyone's built in exactly the same way. So I suppose the same with mental health. I like how you said as well, it depends on, it depends on what's going on in life. It depends on you. It depends on, external factors. I mean, if we talk about, things like COVID in the last few years, I mean, it's stuff that
Yeah.
people couldn't control in the world, and it just kind of has an impact on your mental health.
Right. A great point that you pointed out is the COVID situation, because most of the people were laid off from their jobs, and they did not have work. And it was very confusing for employers as well to how to, proceed in this condition, because all of us were at home. So in that situation, also, I would see this. It's all about perspective. I always say that it's about perspective. Maybe at some point, even I thought that I'm not getting work, or because see, it was just the start of my career. I had just graduated in 2019, and the COVID hit. So
Perfect
I was
time.
like, yeah. So I was like, I don't know how to proceed further. But then I started by, just trying out certain things online. And since then, I think I have made my presence online a little bit than before. I wouldn't say it's a brand or it's great, but yeah, there are more years to go forward. What I was saying is, in that situation also, I thought that it's a better opportunity to, spend time with our families, because on a usual day, if both of your parents are working, you do not have that much amount of time to maybe even sit for a games night, or maybe have dinner or lunch together.
Mm, mm.
So that was a quality time that we got. And generally, when we are working, we feel like we need a rest day, we need a vacation. And we got a vacation naturally, then we think we need work.
Mm. Yeah, human beings are never happy. Eh? It doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Doesn't matter what you give us. We always have something to complain about.
that's right.
Mm. Yeah, I think for us, what has been amazing is, I mean, we've been working with healthcare practitioners for about 10 years now, and we would always try to get them on a call, or like to do a Zoom session, because we knew Zoom before COVID hit. And what's amazing is even this conversation that we're having right now, this podcast, I don't think before COVID we would have been able to connect to practitioners in the same way. So it's almost opened that up, and for practitioners in the same way, is to connect to their patients, to be comfortable
Yeah.
enough to get onto, a Zoom call or WhatsApp call and be okay to do therapy. I think before that time, especially with therapists that were very used to the psychodynamic approach, this would be like a complete no-no, as in there's no way they would even entertain it. But the world kind of changed after COVID. It became closer in a lot of senses from that point of view. Have you found that as well?
Yes, I completely agree to your thought because I would also agree that if this situation didn't come up, probably I would be working offline somewhere and we couldn't have met today.
Hmm.
And there wouldn't be any scope of online mental health. Maybe it would come up more 5 years down the line, but it wouldn't be so soon. But I think COVID has been great in that situation because I'm saying this because today for clients also it's become very easy uh, for them to come out and reach a mental health clinic or an organization is really difficult because booking the therapy itself is the first difficult step they're taking towards their mental peace. Because today in uh, the country that I live in, there's still some amount of stigma attached to mental health, right?
Hmm.
So it becomes difficult for people to tell their parents, or even if they are parents, it becomes difficult for them to say that I need a therapist or I need a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So online has made it easier because they can be anonymous. They can
Hmm.
shut their video if they want. They are in their own space, like environment, home. So they're very much comfortable that way because see, generally going to a physical doctor or a physician is very easy because you visit them very often since childhood. Maybe if there's something or the other happening wrong with your body medically, so you're okay with their chamber, okay with their clinic, okay with visiting them, and even telling 10 people that I had certain things and I went to a doctor. But
Hmm.
that doesn't happen with mental health, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the space, the environment, and the anonymity, I think, is a major factor, like switching off the video, because there are people who cannot talk face to face or share their things because they feel maybe sometimes embarrassed or judged. Even though we are not here to judge them, but they come with a notion because probably of their past experience with sharing with their closed ones.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point. Because if you had to go into a clinic and you were in a waiting room waiting for your session and someone else saw you, that would be some stigma or there would be some
Yes.
embarrassment, around that. Whereas getting onto a Zoom call, it's, no one knows any different. And, that's actually a really good point that you mentioned. And it makes mental health or access to practitioners anyway, a lot more accessible, based on that.
Yeah, yeah, I would totally agree to this because today, sitting in one city of my own country, I can see clients from different cities in my country as well as abroad.
Mm.
So it's become very convenient for me as well to reach to a larger population.
Yeah.
And it's become easier for the population also to reach a larger or a varied uh, professionals
Mm.
because maybe the professionals in their city or country do not have uh, like financial stability, and so they do not have a choice to see like whose fees is what, or I'm talking in very general terms because
Mm.
fees is something that does come up with anybody, be it a person living in India or outside of India. They
Yes.
do inquire about, what is your fee structure? And on basis of that, I think they go ahead or back out. So I think online has given that opportunity for them to seek from various professionals.
Mm. And Simran, I mean, I'm gonna, obviously I would have covered this slightly later in the show, maybe, but
Mhm.
now that you started speaking about fees, can I ask, in India, is there a concept of health insurance companies? So in South Africa, it's called medical aid companies, but it's typically a company that pays for therapy. For the patient. Obviously, they have to have that cover. So sometimes, especially with practitioners, the health insurance company would pay rather than the patient. Do you have that concept in India as well?
Unfortunately, no. But what companies are doing right now is basically, say, for example, you're working or you have a job at XYZ company. So the company has a tie-up with a mental health organization, say ABC. So now XYZ is paying to ABC, and XYZ is providing his or her employees free mental health sessions. Say, for example, six. Certain organizations have 10, certain have eight. So the employers are providing employee assistance programs. But yes, nothing in terms of insurance has yet come in India.
Okay. I think that would be a growing market. I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yes.
Soon, and that's why I told you when I started seeing you on LinkedIn and started following a few other therapists in India, I realized how big that market probably is, because I never I didn't think there would be as many practitioners in independent practice. But again, as I mentioned, that was more just my own naive self. But yeah, it's actually very, very encouraging, because I think the Indian culture is very closed, very conservative. So to be able to speak about mental health and stuff like that must be very difficult, firstly, and it must be it's kind of brave for for patients to actually seek out that help. Do you, based on your experience, do you find that that's a valid point as well?
I would say to some extent, definitely, because there are certain people who are still in that orthodox or conservative mindset where they feel that this is nothing. It's just, you change your lifestyle, or you change your food or appetite, or you change your environment and you'll feel better. It's just a phase, it will pass. But nobody understands that it's not just a phase. It's something that they are facing. Unless you address their emotions or how they're feeling, it's not going to go away. I'll take a very quick example here. Like, say, for example, if you've seen a death in the family or a closed one, people expect you to cry as soon as possible, or they make you cry, that, express your emotions. But they don't understand that the person doesn't want to cry right away. He or she is not feeling to cry. So you can't force anybody to grieve over a death immediately. They might take 1 month, they might take 6 months, they might cry after a year. That's their process. So I would say never disrupt anybody's process. So let them feel whatever they are in the present moment. So coming back to your question, we do face certain clients where they say that our parents don't know about these sessions. So we are paying by our own pocket, or maybe we are working and we are paying. So there are certain clients like that, but I see that on a very rare occasion, because right now people are getting towards being more open-minded in terms of mental health, because they also see the society is growing, as well as the importance of mental health. Because today the amount of importance that we give to physical health, people are understanding that mental health is equally important, because if you do not have the strength and energy or the mindset to go to work, it's going to hamper your performance at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it quite a few times now, Simran, in the discussion around the importance of equating it to almost like how you see physical therapy, or
Yes.
taking care of your body or going to the doctor. And I think that's the point that most people miss as well, is you just kind of expected to figure out life and just do it. And you spend so much of time, especially in the Indian culture, I think, with the academic part, go to school, go to university, get a good degree, get a good job, and do all of that stuff. But if you look at the mental part to that, like how do you get this done? How do you cope with life? How do you cope with everything? I don't think, people put as much emphasis on that. And my best example of this is, if you look at any great sports team or sports person, the amount of professional people around them, including a psychologist, to be able to get them to play at their peak is amazing. And yet every single one of us, especially the guys, that are doing really stressful jobs, there's no help around them to be able to do their jobs. it's just like you just have to figure it out and you just have to know how to do it. And I think that's like so interesting, how as a society we just, expect that to happen without seeking out help from people like yourself.
Yeah, like I agree to what you said because a doctor can't help himself or herself in need. He or she has to go to someone else. Similarly, when you are facing something, if you are unable to share your emotions or unable to express, if your parents and friends are not understanding that or hearing you out, I would suggest to try making them listen that I want to try out therapy. I want to go to a professional at least for once, because I agree to what you said earlier also that here we just focus on complete your study, complete your college, have a degree, have a job, get married, increase your family and so forth. But in that phase, we forget that how are you feeling? What do you want to do in career? Do you want to get a job or not? Do you want to study or not? It's just a set pattern that you have to follow. And in that case, if we fail or if we, have a setback, it's always seen as like maybe you wouldn't work hard enough. Or see, I am not going a complete negative on this, but it's improving, I would say that, because when I see clients of age group say 15, 16, 17, they're very open minded, their parents are very open minded, in their teens and 20s, they are open to this. They're exploring their mental health. And of course, in terms of identity and sexuality as well. So I would say it's progressing from what we were, and it's a good change that I see.
Okay, that's actually really encouraging. It's been kind of our experience as well, in terms of, I think everyone in the world is, I wouldn't say struggling, but definitely getting to grips with, the world as we know it, in terms of gender identity and, mental health and all of those aspects. But I think, it's really encouraging to see people open-minded about it and being able to have the conversation, and also to know where to go and look for help, and to know that maybe help is possibly needed. I think I think a generation back, it probably would not have happened. And definitely probably 10, 15 years back, it probably, would have been very difficult as well.
I totally agree. Like I think that my generation is the last where there were orthodox or conservative mindset, and post I see maybe 2 or 3 years down, like individuals who are 3 years or 5 years younger to me, they are very open to their parents. They talk about everything. I would like give credit to certain maybe shows as well that have come up, could be Indian or could be, shows from abroad, which have helped people to understand certain concerns like sexuality. Because earlier, I wouldn't say that people were open enough to even talk about their sexuality or understand what it exactly means. Today, they know what it means. They are confident in saying that I am this.
Yeah, that's true. So I think probably media, like
Yeah, social
media with
media.
everything, and also the internet and social media and YouTube and all of those things have been amazing. At us getting to the stage where we are in now. And if I look at mental health itself, Simran, so like you said that when we started, obviously it's not a even depression, stress. I mean, it's just a phase, but do you find there's a certain point where it becomes a clinical scenario? And when I say that, I mean, I think the one thing that I've learned, over many, many conversations with the practitioners now, is that it's almost when it becomes, it affects your job, it affects your life. Do you find that's the breaking point as well? When it becomes clinical and when it becomes like, okay, this is just a normal cold kind of thing.
Correct. See, when you know that it's a normal cold, it will get fine or okay by say 3 to 5 days or a week at max or 10 days. But when you know it's a fever of over 3 days, you might need to see a doctor. Similarly, in mental health, there are certain, I don't want to get too much into technicality, but there are certain durations for certain issues, I would say. So, for example, depression, let's take depression. If you feel, the symptoms of depression consistently are there for over 6 months, so definitely it's a major sign to see a therapist or a clinical psychologist, in that case, for a diagnosis to a psychiatrist then. But if you feel that, you're feeling tired, exhausted, your sleep has been affected, appetite has been affected for over 2 or 3 weeks or a month, at least go to a therapist and talk about it. If not going straight away for diagnosis to a psychiatrist, I would suggest seek help from therapists or counselors to understand what you're going through. Because for a diagnosis, it's a longer period, say 6 to 8 months. But to seek help from a therapist, you can always speak to them in, say, uh, seeing the change that you have in yourself after a month or after 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think with each clinical condition, I mean, they each have their own, ways in which you diagnose and you know whether it's a clinical condition or not. And we did cover some of those in the show. So, if you want to look at that, like bipolar or depression or, any of those, there are ways that you can determine whether it is a clinical condition, other than obviously going and seeing a therapist, which is what we recommend. And Simran, in terms of the actual therapeutic process, so just say someone is working with you, how would the sessions normally be structured from the first session onwards?
Okay. Great question. Because I do give an introduction on a daily basis to my clients, like how therapy works. So it's kind of a set, structure now. It's in my head. I can, talk about it in my sleep as well. So,
That's
yeah.
good.
So generally, each session is about 45 minutes to 1 hour long. We generally keep it 45 minutes, and the rest 15 minutes is just buffer time. So it's 45 minutes session where we, initially say in the first session, we just discussed about what the client is feeling and what brings him or her to the session, to basically build rapport with the client in the first session, because definitely the client has come in with a bit of nervousness, a bit of maybe not sure or about how much they should share or not. So I always tell them that we move with your comfort and at your pace. If there are certain questions that I ask and you don't feel like answering, I say it's completely okay. You can straight up tell me about it, because I am also meeting the client for the first time. So I am also not aware what can make the client uncomfortable, right? So it's really important to have that open communication, to specifically tell them that these are the specifics, like 45 minute, and the follow-ups could be once a week. Then consistency is important. Therapy is a slow and long process, so it might require patience from their end. And I also give information about confidentiality, but that confidentiality can be breached if there is high risk case, like suicidal cases. And also that I do give homework, because I have seen in my practice, people come and say that, in the third or fourth session, you just gave us 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but they fail to understand that there was no conversation going on further because you've already seen progress. So I make it a point to mention that it will be approximately 45 minutes, but the duration can vary, because it's not, we are not sitting on a set routine or a timer or a bomb. I would say that, it will diffuse in 45 minutes and we just have to end it, or it has to go till 45 minutes.
Okay, that's pretty good. And when you normally explain this to new patients, do they understand it straight away? Does it make sense to them?
Yeah, because I keep it very simple and in a very layman language. Just the specifics, as I mentioned to you, like duration, confidentiality, and what we do in the first session. That's basic structure of understanding each other and understanding their concerns, and also clarifying that whether you have five concerns or 10 concerns, we'll be working on each one of them, but one at a time, because we can't work on everything at once. and also letting them know that it might take maybe 6 to 8 sessions or 10 sessions or even more, which I cannot come to a conclusion in the first 45 minutes itself. So I do get many clients who ask, what is at the end of the session that, can you tell me, should I do this or not? Or can you tell me what is wrong with me? Or can you tell me how many sessions we would require? To which I say that, see, this is just the first session where we are getting to know each other.
Mm.
And me being a therapist, I cannot decide for you what you have to do or what you can't or what you should do, because that's your decision to make. At the end of the day, whatever you decide is going to affect you. So you shouldn't be regretting the decision, thinking that, okay, Simran told me to do this, so I'm doing, but later on it affected me in a different way. So I tell them I will help you to realize which path you want to choose, or help you with what both paths include. But whether you want to go to path A or path B has to be your choice.
Mm. Mm. That makes sense. I think there's also
Yeah.
treating them. I mean, obviously it's their life, and including them in the process is probably the most important thing. But you're just the guide there. You're the specialist, obviously, that's helping them, navigate those choices and be that sounding board for them.
Yes.
Mm. Medication. I know you mentioned clinical psychologist, and I'd love to know how that context works in India. But obviously there's counseling psychologists, there's clinical, there's psychiatrist. Do you find that with your patients you need to liaise or work with the psychiatrist as well around medication?
Yeah, so we do have counselors or therapists, which is myself, and we just take talk therapy. We do not give a diagnosis, or we do not provide medications. Coming to clinical psychologists, they do provide provisional diagnosis, because the only right to give a diagnosis and medication is with a psychiatrist. So I do have clients who have been either earlier diagnosed and are on medications and are seeking therapy. So they only come up and say that, I saw a psychiatrist, he or she diagnosed with me, so with sorry, he or she diagnosed me with so and so condition, and I'm on medication since so long. So I know, okay, this person is on medication and I have to work accordingly. But there are many clients who come in new and first time to therapy, but seeing the severity and intensity of that symptoms and concerns, I personally recommend them to see either a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist for more clarity.
Okay, cool. That actually makes sense. I didn't know that. I think it works differently in South Africa as well as in the UK in terms of the diagnosis process, maybe. But it's interesting that only the psychiatrist can do the diagnosis in India. But
Yeah, like the clinical psychologist can give a diagnosis, but they cannot write for sure that you are diagnosed with depression. They can say it's a provisional diagnosis,
okay.
because the testing and everything is done by a clinical psychologist. So,
Mm,
firstly, maybe if it's a clinical case, the person visits either a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist first, and both refer the client to either one of them the next time. So, all three of us do have to work together to maintain that client.
mm, okay. And do you use the term multidisciplinary team? Because that's quite a common term that I've come across. When people normally talk about the team that they're working with, the other practitioners. Is that a term that you use as well?
I wouldn't say completely, because currently I do work at an organization where we do have clinical psychologists and a psychiatrist. But on my private practice, I do have a few contacts with clinical psychologists as a psychiatrist, but I don't have a team of my own. So
Okay.
it's just on a referral basis that if I feel that the client needs reference for a clinical or a psychiatrist, I do share the contact with them.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's common with other practitioners as well, that we know of. But it's typically it's more like a virtual team, not like your own team or not a team even in the same center. But it's like, for instance, the psychiatrist that always refers to you, or you always refer to them, and it's almost like this like you just have a good working relationship. And normally it forms part of your, multidisciplinary team, because your patient then goes to that psychiatrist, and you obviously, talk about the patient, or, discuss, certain things if you needed to. So we find that normally comes up. Any recommendations or anything that you would say to, to loved ones or family members that, where someone is going through mental health issues? Is there something that you normally say to them, or that you would say to them in terms of how to support that person better?
I would just say that, express what you're feeling. If you feel that nobody understands you, just maybe write it down, or use a voice note. So at least it feels like you've vented out. And if you have a person whom you trust and whom you feel that he or she can understand, just go and talk to them. And later, when you are in a better mental space, maybe you can reach out to a professional.
I never thought of the voice note idea. That's actually a really good one. It's like, I hate doing it on WhatsApp, but, I think even just the voice recorder on your phone is probably a really good way to do almost like a emotional or brain dump of your feelings and thoughts. And because everyone talks about journaling, the problem is journaling is you have to get into that frame of mind of doing the journaling. Whereas, just taking out your smartphone and just doing a voice note is pretty easy to do.
We have to adapt to the changing generation, Gen Z. So yeah, there are many people who feel like, we don't know what to write, or we are lazy enough to write because we don't like writing. So I say it's okay. We have an alternative. You can voice record it, or maybe, if you feel it's more okay to type it on your notes, you can do that, or use a laptop. So I think we need to modify our techniques also, considering the generation that's coming up.
Yeah, well said. We had a speech therapist on. I think her name was Marie Thiot, and so in the early years of a child, they say don't give them too much of devices. But if you've ever watched children love devices. I mean, like the iPad, the phone, and so she said the same thing. She said, it's almost adapting, therapy to the new way of working. So it's not good enough to just say, no, you can't do that. It's like, okay, how can we help them based on the fact that we know that they use, those devices?
Completely.
Very cool. But, and books and resources, is there something that you normally refer to, speak to your clients about, or refer them to in terms of CBT or mental health issues?
Honestly, no, because I know that they are in a space where they don't want to do anything, the activities they used to like earlier as well. So why would they read a book, or read a resource that I am sending? Usually what I do, I send worksheets as and when required. It's a 1 page or a 2 page. And that's also too late into therapy, like say in the third or fourth session, when they have become a little more comfortable with homework. And in other cases, the clients are very smart nowadays. They tell me that, oh, have you read this book about mental health? Have you read this? And I'm like, I am so engrossed in this time. They're like, okay, everyone is smart now.
Yeah. That's the problem, is everyone can go diagnose themselves after they do a Google search.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So generally, I don't recommend any books, because I know, see, I am also not a person who likes to read a lot. So it's just to keep my, self updated. There are very few resources that I read occasionally. So I know there's something that I don't like. Why should I refer it to someone else? Because I also find it very difficult to, focus consistently on reading, because that's not something that I like. So if you are not in a good mind space and I tell you to read, you will say, I don't want to go to her again.
Okay, that's quite interesting too. Yeah, because I mean, like, just getting your psychology degree must have involved tons of reading. Okay, and the same with courses and tools. There's nothing that you normally recommend to your patients or anyone that asks.
Yeah, there are worksheets, as I said, for say journaling or for anger management or self-help tips for motivation, procrastination. So those are very simple handouts. They state all certain positive affirmations. So basically, it's a one-page or a two-page worksheet that they either have to fill out or just have to read it to be more, uh, you know, motivated in terms of procrastination.
Okay. Sounds good. I like that. I think when I'm just looking through the brief now, the one question that I didn't ask was around the symptoms. So how do you know, and maybe you covered it, but let's just do it one more time. But how do you know, are there particular symptoms that, someone should be aware of if we're talking around mental health?
See, I wouldn't say that if you have this symptom, just rush to a therapist because for each it's different, and there are maybe 10 symptoms for a particular condition. So I wouldn't expect you to know all of them. But yes, if you see there's a disbalance or imbalance between your life, like work life, social life, personal life, and family life, if everything is disbalanced, and if you feel that I cannot handle it or manage it anymore, and I don't feel like doing anything in any area of my life, I think it's the right time to seek help, because when you see that you can't help yourself, it's better to reach out.
Mm, Okay, that sounds really cool too. So Simran, we're going to start wrapping up soon, and I normally always like to ask this question towards the end, just to make sure that we covered everything. Obviously, mental health, I mean, it's a big topic. We're not going to cover everything in an hour. It's almost impossible. But I think what I really enjoyed about this conversation was getting a sense of how your private practice works, how you work with patients, and what patients can kind of look like kind of expect from a therapeutic process. I think we covered CBT, to a small context, but also covering how the eclectic approach works. Around this topic of mental health and CBT, is there anything that you thought I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I think we pretty much discussed a lot of things today, and I just hope that people understand that reaching out is for help is not a sign of weakness, because there are a lot of people who think that having a mental health condition or an issue is a sign of weakness. Specifically, I would say in terms of males, because they feel expressing their emotion is a sign of weakness. I think we should, or we must try to at least change that. They also have emotions, they are not robots. So I guess they should also start expressing them gradually, maybe, not pushing them over much.
Well said. Yeah, and I think on that really amazing note, I want to really thank you very much for your time. I know we had some scheduling issues around finding the best
Yeah.
time, but yeah, we're very honored to have you on the show and sharing your knowledge with us and your experience.
No, it's been really great, and I think it's an hour well spent. I would love to, do it again whenever possible. It was a great conversation.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.